When it comes to the world of glass, there's a lot of different options for pieces, but there's also a lot of different options for percolators when you're using water pipes. Now, percolators are great because they can make your hit smoother by taking one big cloud of smoke and breaking it up into smaller clouds that pass through water that are going to cool off and become smoother overall. Now, there's a lot of different glass that can diffuse your smoke or vapor, and it can really vary depending on what type of piece you're using, but here are my top 5 percolators when you're using a glass piece. I have a lot of options for glass. If you want to see me use some of these different percolators, tune into my Twitch stream. I get high every night at 9 p.m. Eastern. Also, I'm doing a Puffco giveaway, and if you have Amazon Prime, you can subscribe to my Twitch for free, but that gets you 6 extra entries on the Puffco giveaway. Now, these 5 aren't in any exact order, but I'm going to put my favorite at the end, and I might end up doing a tier list on these so we can include more than 5 options. The number 1 is honeycomb percolators. Now, this is something I don't use much anymore. I think it's better for combustion. A lot of my vapor pieces don't have one, but honeycomb percolators are really nice. They fall into the category of disc percolators, and it's basically just a disc in the tube that the water has to pass through. They work well with other percolators. If you find pieces with 2 or 3 perks in it, sometimes they have a honeycomb in there because they work out well. But it's basically a big old disc with a bunch of holes in it the water's got to pass through. It splits your big old cloud up into a bunch of tiny little bubbles. I've seen pieces with 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 honeycomb percolators, and then each time it passes through the next one, it breaks up into even more bubbles. Honeycombs are really cool, and they're definitely one of the best percolators. Number 2 on the list is one I've used a whole bunch. Some of my pieces have it now, but one of my old daily drivers that I used for years had a matrix percolator in it. This is another one that provides a lot of diffusion. It's like a big old barrel or slitted chamber. It's got a bunch of holes in it for water to pass through. Shower head perks kind of push the bubbles out of the bottom, but like a matrix perk is going to have a lot more options for the smoke or vapor to pass through. Now, I do want to say not all these percolators are exact. There's a lot of matrix perks that look different than others, or there might be something that you don't think it's this type of percolator, but it is just by the design. But my old piece that I used to use on an e-nail had a really nice smooth matrix perk on it. The bubbles came out so evenly. It made a ton of little bubbles in there, and it gave some of the smoothest hits. But also a lot of other pieces that I have just have a matrix perk in it. Really nice hits. Now, the next one on the list, very popular, and you can get different results depending on the style of piece it's in. But a Swiss percolator is a bit different than a lot of the other options out there because you're not really forcing the smoke and the water through small holes. With the Swiss, you have a bit more of an open airflow, but there's like pieces of glass that get in the way of the path of the smoke to break it up. So it's not trying to break it into a ton of small holes, but it interrupts the flow of the smoke through the piece. So when the water and smoke are traveling, it just breaks it up into a lot of options. I like Swiss percolators because you get a good variety of bubbles in there. There's like big and small ones. It has a nice open airflow hit. It's not super restricted. Some of these percolators, like a honeycomb, is super restricted on the airflow, especially if you have like 3 or 4 of them. You kind of feel the pressure build up when you're pulling through. But like a Swiss perk is a bit more open. If you've ever used like a fab egg, that's more rounded. And it doesn't restrict the airflow, but it interrupts it with the glass. If you've ever seen one, the little holes that they put in basically act as little walls to split the smoke. They're very cool. Now, number 4 on the list here is probably one of the ones that provides the best diffusion and can provide some of the best percolation by far. And that's a fritted disc or a crushed glass or a rooster apparatus, whatever you want to call it. But it's like a honeycomb supercharged. Now, a honeycomb is a disc with a bunch of little holes in it, and they're all kind of put evenly on the disc there, so you get some nice even percolation. A crushed disc is exactly like it sounds. It's crushed glass shaped into a disc, so the holes that you get for percolation, it's going to vary between each crushed glass or fritted disc that you're using, because it's probably pretty hard to crush the glass down exactly the same each time. But what it does is it provides really small holes for the air, for the smoke, for the water to pass through. So that creates tight little bubbles. It creates like almost foamy like bubbles. You're getting a ton of bubbles, a ton of water action on your smoke or vapor. I will say, if you're doing like combustion or anything like that, crushed glass will catch ash. It'll catch little bits of flour and stuff like that. They can clog a little bit easier. They can be a little bit more difficult to clean just because the holes are so much tighter than other ones, that if you get buildup in there, it can be a little bit more difficult to get out, but not impossible. They make down stems with crushed glass tips. I've seen a lot of options out there. But if you're pulling anything through, any solids, you're doing snaps, or you're pulling any bits of flour through, that can get in those tiny little holes and clog it. Or on another percolator, it might just pass through. Now, last on the list, this is my favorite. This is what I think is the best, and I think it's the most versatile, but just a basic diffused down stem. I think percolators are great, but at the end of the day, I think if you want the best quality, the smoothest hit, you got to start looking at your material first. Having tons of percolators and the best percolators can really make your hit smoother, but if you got really good quality stuff, you might not need to make it that much smoother. So I use a lot of pieces with just a basic downstem with a couple holes in it. My big beaker, I have a downstem with just 2 small holes at the bottom. It restricts the airflow a little bit more than some of the more wide open downstems. That way I don't have to pull as hard when I'm doing like vapor hits. But I do like downstems. I like that on combustion, that's where the bulk of the resin is gonna build up, so I can just pull it out and get it nice and clean. I like that you can get variety in the downstems. I mentioned crushed glass earlier. You can get slitted ones, you can get shower head ones, like other percolators you can get on the end of your downstem. I've seen honeycomb ones or just ones with a bunch of holes in them. But at the end of the day, I think if you have nice quality flour or concentrate, that's gonna make your hit better, and the percolators can only help so much. Either way, come get high with me on Twitch. These smoke sessions at 9 p.m. Eastern. I'll see you there. Bring that Amazon Prime and give me that Jeff Bezos weed money. Have a lit day, my dudes.